All right, let's end our countdown strong with the final five best TV series of the century. The fifth best TV show of the century is Deadwood. Many people would say the best Western TV show of all time. It really is about the founding of America because even though it's a Western, it's set in this town of Deadwood. And so it's not a lot of like wide open spaces and cattle drives and all the hallmarks that you might expect. Very few scenes take place outside the town. But the first season is really about this town sort of moving into civilization slowly but surely, this outlaw haven. The second season, a little bit more so. And the third season, full on conflict of big business, a gold tycoon who moves into the town and wants to basically run it as a mining town. And then, of course, people who are in the town, they don't want that. It's basically going to be a monopoly town if they do that. Really about capitalism, big versus small, city versus state, municipalities, the battle for statehood. Are they going to get brought into the Dakota territories or the Montana territories? It's just really interesting, period. It's probably one of the best historical shows of all time. And then I think it takes events that are somewhat dry and boring in other TV shows like Turn, and it really gives it fresh blood and juice by having these characters talk. David Mamet meets Shakespeare, I think a lot of people have compared it to. But the scheming, the power plays, the backbiting, the back and forth, I think it really shatters the illusions that people back then were a simpler species, less complex, and of course all that's bullshit. People were scheming back then. They were figuring out angles back then, probably even more so because they took more to survive. So Deadwood is just excellent. Ian McShane as Al Swearingen, one of the best TV characters of all time. George Hurst, who's the eventual villain, I think is very similar to what we're actually seeing in the world today. The fourth and third best TV shows is The Shield and Breaking Bad. Now, you can almost say these two series are tied in a certain way. Breaking Bad is probably more perfect because each season is laser focused. But Breaking Bad, what makes it great is not so much that it's a realistic portrayal of the drug trade. It's not really, but it's the psychology of the characters. Walter White, if Al Swearingen is one of the best TV characters of all time, Walter White and Tony Soprano, they're probably the best characters of all time. So to have this chemistry teacher who discovers late in life is cancer and he wants to become a meth lord, it's really about these suppressed emotions that he's dealt with his whole life of inferiority, of underachievement, of being pushed around and pushed aside, not wanting to deal with it. I think people hated Walter White when the show was on in a weird way. It's weird because they didn't have a problem with Vic Mackey or Tony Soprano or Stringer Bell or Al Swearingen, but they really seem to resent Walter. And I think it's partly because the other characters, their circumstances require them to almost be in this underworld. Tony inherits it. Stringer Bell inherits it. Al Swearingen's in a lawless time in the Wild West. These are violent men in violent times and criminal syndicates who almost inherit their role. Walter White's a guy who's suburban, had a wife and kids, but he really discovers that he has an affinity for this criminal underworld. He's really quite good at it and better than anyone would suspect. And I think that makes people uncomfortable. And I think that's why they maybe have a reaction to him that they don't have for other anti-heroes necessarily. But because of him and Gus Fring and some of the characters and how deep they are and how complex they are, it's almost like a great novel as a thriller. Breaking Bad does really well at juggling genres. It's laugh out loud funny in one scene, heartbreaking in the next, and then scary and terrifying and edge of your seat. The third season cliffhanger is great. The crawl space episode is great. These are almost unbearably tense moments. I watched the show live. I didn't stream it. So between the third and fourth season, I had to wait like a year and some change to find out what happened, and it's just killing me to figure it out. But the fact that a show can pull you in and make you care that much is a testament. The Shield is more of a procedural, but it's rare in that each season is better than the last one. The first season is probably going to be your least favorite. I'll just go ahead and tell you. But it does get better. The second season is better. The third season is excellent. That's when it really starts to really get good. But it's about a corrupt cop in Los Angeles, very relevant to what's going on. Racism, police brutality. One cop is closeted and gay. And so there's a lot of relevant issues that have only become more so since it went off the air. And by the time you get to Forrest Whitaker as an internal affairs cop, sort of almost, really up in their business, your loyalties are divided. You sort of want to see this criminal gang, which are the police, brought to justice, and they're also the protagonists. So I think it really is excellent. Vic Mackey is a terrific, terrifying character. And in the final season, I will say that probably the series finale of The Shield, I will say it's probably my favorite of all time. It's probably the best series finale of all time. If I was judging strictly by series finales, it might be the number one show. But watch it. The final season's great. Seasons 3 and 5, it really is excellent. And you get to see Anthony Anderson as a bad guy. You get to see excellent turns by Glenn Close and Forrest Whitaker, and the main cast of characters, which have gone on to some bigger and better things like Walton Goggins since it went off the air. First and second series, similarly to 3 and 4, it's The Wire and The Sopranos. One is like a fantastic documentary. The other is like a fantastic novel. And so it really kind of depends on, are you into American literature or do you like nonfiction? The Wire is probably the best TV show ever made. Many people would say so. It's got a great cast of characters. Each season expands. When you start watching it, just like The Shield, you have no idea that it's going to get so much better. But the first season is a relatively contained police investigation that's still an excellent drama. But then the second season brings in the ports. The third season brings in the politics, City Hall, the mayor's race. The fourth season brings in the school system. The fifth season brings in the newspaper and the media. And so by the end, you've seen an entire city laid out. And so it's one of those great big panoramic explorations of an entire city and the way that it operates, the processes within it, how people get lost in systems, how it can begin to not see people after a while, oppression and things like that. It is so relevant and so good. Everybody, I think, just about who's ever watched this series just about loves it and knows how good it is. So it probably is the best series of all time. But I almost tie it with The Sopranos, because in my opinion, Tony Soprano is the best TV character of all time. And you get into his mindset. You get so deep into his psychology. He almost feels like a flesh and blood person. And that's so important because even though we see him do terrible things, and in the final season, some really terrible things, he's almost becoming a monster. He's almost completely losing his humanity at a certain point. He's crossing the line from sociopath into somewhat of a psychopath. But that humanity pulls you back, and that investment that you have pulls you back, so that when he's cradling his son, your heart can't help but break. And several moments throughout the series, it's weird to think of a show that is an R-rated drama, mostly about unlikable psychopaths and criminals. It's probably made me cry more than all the other shows on this list combined, more than Parenthood and The Good Place and all these shows that are more meant to be designed to tearjerk. The relationship with his kids is so crucial, and especially maybe his son, because like when he's afraid that his son has inherited all his worst qualities and none of his best ones, and he's breaking down in front of his therapist, like, how are we going to save this kid? You almost can't help but feel for this man that you never thought you'd have these kind of feelings for, this depth of feeling. Towards the end, when he tells his son, you got to grow up. I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's just so excellent and heartbreaking. His mother, who I really wish that actress had not died, because I would have loved to have seen what the series looked like, given David Chase's original vision for the series. But unfortunately, the actress who plays Tony's mom dies, so her story arc gets cut prematurely. But the first season and her scenes in it are still so excellent. Fifth season, Steve Buscemi shows up. He's great in a guest arc. My personal favorites are seasons 1, 2, and 5, if I had to pick. But I think even the worst season, which many people think is season 4, it's still better than you think. There's a death of a main character that's interesting. There's the final episode, which is the dissolution of Tony's marriage, which is so great. It's like scenes of a marriage mob version. That's the thing. The show is so great in family dynamics. You forget that you're watching a mob drama after a while. It almost doesn't become a crime series. It's a family show where people occasionally murder each other. There's Shakespearean tragedy. There's drama. There's heartbreaking scenes. Even though it's not a perfect series and some episodes don't work, and some people question the series finale and how good it is and if it really works, it doesn't really matter. I still think The Wire and The Sopranos are just about tied. One is more perfect, one is best, but the other may be more of your favorite. And so it just depends on your personal taste. But I don't think you can go wrong with any of these 5 series, and I really hope you watch every one of these 5, and also the rest of this list. Thank you for watching the best TV shows of this century, and hopefully we can do one for the movies of this century pretty soon.